So the name of the presentation today is Making Lightning Invisible. As you mentioned, my name is John Carvalho. I'm with a company called Synonym. We're making a ecosystem of Bitcoin products that is supposed to be comprehensive and just assumes that Bitcoin already won. So imagine if we actually take down, big banks, big state, big government. What do we replace all of that with in our ecosystem? And we're trying to figure that out. So we make various products and protocols and support various Bitcoin protocols to be able to realize this vision while doing a good user experience for people. It doesn't take long to be in Bitcoin before you realize that Lightning is the cool thing. Everybody loves Lightning. Everybody's talking about what they're doing with Lightning. They're making Lightning apps, etc. And the reason for this is there are really cool things about it. It makes you be able to send Bitcoin transactions really quickly. You can send many transactions very cheaply and inexpensively. And there are privacy benefits. And unlike a lot of alternatives for using, cryptocurrency quickly or cheaply, like altcoins and things like this, it's still Bitcoin. Like, you know that you're using Bitcoin. You can stay within the Bitcoin ecosystem, hold your own keys, etc. But lurking underneath Lightning is a lot of complexity. It's very, very difficult to make Lightning something that's easy to use, both for users and providers of applications and platforms. But the thing about this is, the Bitcoin ecosystem is very engineer driven. And so a lot of the applications tend to just be like taking all of the features of the software and creating buttons and user interface to manage them. And so you end up with applications that are very developer focused, and they make the user have to understand all kinds of new concepts that represent the complexity of the technology. And this isn't normal, right? Like, when you use email, you don't have to learn all about how email protocol works and how everything in the background works. You don't have to know how to repair a car to use a car. So why do we do this with Bitcoin? Why aren't we trying to make it so people don't even know Lightning exists? I think it's just an early stage where we're trying to make sure they understand everything and know what they're getting into. But Bitcoin is already so hard to learn and understand. Most people, when they join Bitcoin, they get obsessed and they start trying to consume every podcast and consume every book and read everything they can, and they reach this kind of point where they feel like they're confident and now they understand Bitcoin. They start shilling it to people, orange pilling people. But then very quickly, you kind of realize, oh wait, I don't know nearly as much I thought, and there's this whole other mountain of knowledge that I have to climb. And now we want to pile on Lightning on top of that and say, oh, now learn Lightning too. Learn all about Bitcoin, learn all about Lightning, and be one of us. But this is just not a normal way to make products, to make things that are friendly to use for people. And I think it's an unreasonable expectation. So how do we deal with this conflict? How do we make it so people can still use these new technologies, but in a way where they only have to know what they need to know to use them, and we can abstract away everything else? Some of the things that we have to deal with, as examples of the complexity or new concepts, are here on the slide. You have this complex aspect of routing through the Lightning Network, creating channels, having a local balance, a remote balance, using invoices instead of addresses, managing liquidity, HTLCs, and you just get into all these acronyms and new things that you have to learn if you want to engage with the community and discuss Lightning. In some cases, even just use a Lightning app. But the problem is, the way most people deal with that complexity is they just avoid it altogether. They use a custodial app, which is essentially just an account. It's not that much different than having a bank account or an exchange account, but they just do this, and because it just happens so frictionlessly, they just are okay with it. And so now you have tons and tons of people that say they're using Lightning, that say they're bringing Lightning to the world, but they're not really using Lightning. They're just using an account system, a trusted system. And the problem with when you use trusted systems is you lose all of the qualities of why you should be using Bitcoin in the first place. Custodial systems can be censored, they require permission, they can run fractional reserves, they can lose your Bitcoin, be hacked, etc. A lot of people worry about holding their own keys. They think, oh, I'm scared to lose my money. But the thing is, when you use a custodian in Bitcoin, if they lose your money, there's no insurance. There's no the responsibility doesn't go away. They can lose it too. It's just as difficult. And we have no idea how much Bitcoin is actually in these custodial Lightning wallets, and what it would be like if a major loss occurred. Imagine if something like Wallet of Satoshi, which is a very popular app, or Blue Wallet, but they're now removing their custodial aspect. Imagine if one of these major custodians lost all the Bitcoin, how many people that would negatively affect, and whether that would slow down Lightning adoption. As I mentioned, these are some of the risks with custodians. You have just regular old counterparty risk, attacks, confiscation, rehypothecation, hacks. You can have honeypots. You can have bugs where there's losses. You can have rug pulls or KYC rug pulls where all of a sudden now you can't access your balance unless you give them your identity and you give them your personal information. There's just a lot of trade-offs. So it's a very insidious way of dealing with Lightning complexity to just say, don't deal with it and just trust us to deal with it. As an example, just these 4 companies alone in the most recent cycle, they lost about $8 billion of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and fiat. Just these 4 companies alone. These are all custodians. These are all things people were using to try to leverage their Bitcoin to be able to make more money. So this is where I introduced Bitkit. Bitkit is one of the products that we're making. It's a mobile app wallet that supports Bitcoin and Lightning, where you actually get to hold your own keys and you run your own Lightning node in the app. And our mission is to basically make Lightning invisible. We're trying to say, what would it look like if the user never knew Lightning existed? It's not totally possible yet, but what we try to do is stay on top of that and be innovators on both the design and the user experience, and adopt technology early as Lightning gets more mature to try to get to that point. So the question is, can we do it? Can you actually take both Bitcoin and Lightning and create a user experience where the user doesn't even know which one they're using when they use it? It just works. The way we do this, I'm going to give you several examples, is we merge and we abstract aspects of these technologies into things the user is familiar with. We speak in user terms. With Lightning, we have another product called BlockTank, which is called an LSP, a Lightning Service Provider. It's sort of like an ISP, like you get your internet from them, but in this case, you get your Lightning connection from them. And so we don't use, for example, channels as a term. We call them connections to familiarize the user with the concept where when you're using Lightning, you have to actually be connected to a network. Here's one example of one of the things we do with the UI. We default, as you can see at the top there, to the balance being in Satoshis, which is the base unit of Bitcoin. And we denominate it by using a little lightning bolt icon to start familiarizing the user with a few things just inherently that, Bitcoin, you don't have to own a whole Bitcoin. There are pieces of Bitcoins. There's a smaller unit. That there's something to do with Lightning going on. If you hear somebody mention it, you'll have seen this Lightning symbol. The Lightning symbol kind of looks like an S already, so it might as well represent Satoshis. And then in the app, you can just tap on the balance, and it will shift through whatever you prefer. So if you prefer to see the balance in Bitcoin, or you want to see it in dollars or your local currency, you can kind of cycle through. Then part of using Lightning is it's kind of hard to introduce the user to the concept of that they have to have a channel, a connection to the Lightning network. And there's these concepts of like local balance and remote balance, like I mentioned earlier. And what we've done is we're experimenting with this user interface where we just represent it as a slider. And instead of calling it like on-chain Bitcoin and off-chain, or legacy Bitcoin and Lightning, we differentiate it as spending and savings. And so this is something people are familiar with, like with their checking account and their savings account. So I can say, okay, well, how much of my money do I just want to keep in savings, inactive, on-chain, and how much of it do I want to have that I'm going to spend, that I want to be ready to have instant purchases? And the user just configures this slider, and the complexity in the background it sets the settings for them based on their choice. We also do the same thing with how we portray the wallet area where when you look at your Bitcoin, in the wallet, you tap on the Bitcoin card and you're looking at all the details. It shows how much of your Bitcoin is in savings, how much of it is in spending, which is again, on-chain versus Lightning. And there's a little like conversion button there, and it brings up the slider again. And so this is just a way to kind of abstract and simplify and deal with Lightning. Another really cool thing is, we can blend these things together to where when the user wants to receive a payment, when they're showing that QR code, actually inside of the QR code is both a Bitcoin address and a Lightning invoice. So they don't have to know which one to show, because whatever their counterparty wallet supports, it will just use the information it needs. So if your counterparty only can pay you on-chain, it will use the Bitcoin address. If they can pay you with Lightning, it will use the Lightning invoice. And then similarly, but actually quite different, we support this concept of contacts in Bitkit. And contacts has this really cool decentralized technology that we've created with a protocol that we've created called /tags. And what /tags does is it takes a similar concept to like your pub key or Bitcoin address. And instead of using an actual Bitcoin key, it just uses a generic cryptographic key pair, and it uses that as your identity. Like instead of a phone number or instead of an email address, you can now just use a key to represent your identity. And when you do that, it gives you kind of interoperability with a few other cool peer-to-peer systems like DHT networks. And that's how we use the /tags payment feature, where if you add me as a contact, like if you scan the QR code and add me, you can also choose me when you're paying. So you don't even have to scan an invoice or ask me for a Bitcoin address. What it does is it just scans my current data of what payment methods I support in the background. So it uses the DHT network, which is kind of like BitTorrent. It uses a DHT network, it finds the payment data, and then it just pays it in the background. And you can abstract as many payment methods as you like with this. So for example, our wallet supports Bitcoin and Lightning, but your wallet supports Lightning and Ethereum. Well, if they both use /tags for a contacts, then we will match in the background automatically because we both support Lightning, and it will just automatically choose that payment method. I mentioned earlier that we have BlockTank, and this is the LSP service. Another thing that we do to try to improve Lightning usability is we have a community group where we work on LSP specifications. And the idea here is there are a lot of other companies like us doing some similar things with Lightning, and they want to try to run LSPs as a business. And so we try to make interoperable specs to where if a user wants to stop using BlockTank for Lightning, stop using our company for Lightning, they can easily switch to these other companies that support the same protocol spec. Now, this isn't fully implemented yet, but you should know that like these people are working together actively as an industry to make this interoperability possible. Another feature that we're going to support, it's not in the current version, but it'll be in a version very soon, is zero confirmation channels. One of the friction points with Lightning is you do have to do an on-chain Bitcoin transaction to be able to like get started. And there is a wait time to this, 10, 20 minutes more, depending on the situation. And the LSPs can take a risk and basically provide the channels without confirmations. And there are certain ways they can protect themselves from being scammed by users when they do this, but supporting this technology is very necessary to maintain like the instant user experience people expect when they're using something for payments. And then another cool tech that we're going to be adding is something called JIT channels, just-in-time channels. And this makes it so we can stop with the current situation where in Bitkit, even though maybe you only want to use Lightning, you still have to deposit regular Bitcoin on-chain first so you can use that to create a Lightning connection. Well, with JIT channels, you can just show a Lightning invoice when you're not even on the Lightning network yet, but still receive a payment because you're using the BlockTank LSP when you use Bitkit. And what happens is we see that incoming payment, and we see that you don't actually have a connection, but we do have a relationship with your node. And so we can prompt you and say, hey, do you want to open a channel? And here's the fee for the channel to receive this payment, even though you're not on Lightning yet. And if we do that with zero confirmation, it's like you could instantly, open your new freshly installed Bitkit wallet, show your QR code, and just receive a Lightning payment, like with no wait time. And so that's getting closer to this ideal of the user not having to know Lightning exists, because everything is becoming more and more instant, less friction. There are still some challenges ahead with Lightning. A few unsolved things that are being worked on, and there might be solutions, but generally real challenges are offline payments. Lightning really only works well when both people are online. So this makes it something where, like, if you're a small merchant, you might have to use a payment processor because you can't be online all the time. Or if you want to be able to, like, receive tips, you have to trust somebody else to receive them for you. And these are all unfortunate trade-offs to where it would be nice to be able to do something asynchronous, where it didn't matter whether you were online if I wanted to pay you. Another one is, as you may have noticed, on-chain Bitcoin fees are a little bit higher than normal for a few months now. This actually affects the reliability of Lightning as well. And so it's another challenge we're going to have to deal with and figure out and abstract away this complexity for users. A final one, and a really underappreciated one, or a not properly respected one, is censorship and regulation. Lightning nodes and LSPs use IP addresses. They use the internet protocol to be able to do what we do with the network. And when you do this as a business, like an LSP, or you just use IP in general, you are identifiable in some way to the government. And so if the government at some point doesn't like how we're using Lightning, or they think it's too competitive with fiat or whatever, they have means to censor aspects of the Lightning network that can really cause a lot of problems for people. But there are ways that we can mitigate that and remove that over time, but it's not there yet. A couple things that are coming, that technology we know we will have, is one thing called, there's more than this, but one is called splicing, and another is called dual-funded channels. I won't go into a lot of detail, but again, this is just more complexity that makes it easier for us to be able to hide things like changing the size of your channel, and being able to create a channel where you don't have to trust the LSP, so you can use your own Bitcoin when you create a connection instead of trusting the LSP to provide it. And that's the summary of it. So we have this concept called the zero Lightning experience. And this is just the idea that maybe one day we can have wallets get to a point where users never even knew Lightning existed as a concept. They're just using a Bitcoin wallet and it just works. When somebody is presenting them a Lightning situation, it just works. When they're presenting them an on-chain situation, it just works. And they don't have to know the difference anymore. And that's what we're going for. We're not there yet. It'll probably be some years before most wallets are able to do something like this. But it's, as I mentioned, a very important goal, because the alternative is people using something else. And that something else is going to be a shitcoin, a custodian, something where there's a lot of risk and kind of backtracking on the progress of Bitcoin adoption. If you want to try Bitkit, there's a QR code here. It's still in beta testing. We have a few more minutes. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know if I should. He's got a mic.
You talked about IP censorship of nodes in a Lightning network. Would it be an idea to essentially identify a node or give a slash tag to a node so that nodes essentially are identified by that pub key? You can switch the IP addresses, but it has the same slash tag, so you can, like, if you're getting one IP censored, you just switch to another one, but your peers still connect to you because you have the same slash tag on your node?
You're very much on the right track. That's one of the reasons why we have a payment protocol within slash tags, like as I mentioned, for abstracting all the payment methods underneath. And so one of the ways to abstract IP addresses, which are a censorship point, is to use keys, because you can't, like, take away somebody's key, right? And so now you move the censorship over to an asynchronous area. So I can say, well, what if I, tell you all my payment information somewhere else, and it's not associated with my identity, or at least my IP identity. Instead, it's my key identity, which my key identity might not have an IP location. I could use anybody to host the data of where to find my data. And so it's sort of like replacing it with DNS. If you're familiar with DNS, it's like you can use your key as a naming system instead of the DNS system or an email or an IP address. And there are some ways of doing this. There are more ways like using proxies, VPNs, things like this. It's always kind of a cat and mouse game to some degree, or a, what's the word, when you have wars competing on technology, but you get the idea. Yeah, that is the right idea.
Is there a relationship between slash tags and Nostr in terms of key pairs and stuff, or is there a way that you can integrate Nostr contacts, npubs into Bitkit?
Yes and no. So interoperability, when users want to talk about interoperability, what they want is kind of what you're describing. Can this just all work? In other words, I have a profile here, I have a profile there, I have a key there, I have a key there. The problem is the Nostr system doesn't use a DHT. So the networks are not actually compatible. And so interoperability from a product standpoint, what it usually means is either we create more complexity to convert your thing to this thing, or like a migration process of some kind, or we support both things. Because interoperability is not, it's just us using the same thing. That's what it actually is. And so, like with Nostr, Nostr uses, we both derive the keys from a Bitcoin seed, but Nostr uses actual SecP. And so we use ed2159, and there are basically certain reasons why you would choose one or the other. One of the reasons we do is because we also use a system that uses append-only logs for the data store, and this provides a lot of cool advantages that alleviate some of the problems that Nostr has with relays. And so this is a much more scalable and decentralized and harder to censor system than that. Now, and the question just basically boils down to, do we want to support both? And the incentive to insert both is mostly just to see if one network can move people from that network to this network. And I don't really see that as like progress so much as just like a crab trap. And so it's not really my focus. My focus is we have a really long-term vision for building out this system the way we think the world needs to have a new web as far as slash tags go. And so we want to just finish that. And then we can take a look at the ecosystem. And if Nostr is still like undeniable, like there's no way people will accept not supporting it, then we'll reconsider. But for the moment, to add that complexity on top of what we're trying to accomplish, it's just too much.
Yeah, right call.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Hi. Did you have time to read something about the new L2 ARC, Burak's proposal, and what's your take on it?
A lot of people have asked me that question this week. I'll be very honest with you.
I mean, that's probably because your opinion matters in this space, and
Well, thank you. I hope so. I don't know, but it is typically the kind of thing I would become very informed about very quickly. But the longer I'm in Bitcoin, the more I know how to handle certain trends. And my current attitude with something like this is, well, it's pretty complex. It attaches itself to another complex thing, Lightning, and it requires a soft fork to work properly. These are all very speculative and complex things to consider getting into, and my honest attitude is I'm just not going to care about it for at least a year. Because in that year, I'm going to have all kinds of people coming up to me saying, what do you think about ARC? What do you think about this aspect of ARC? And I'm going to learn all about it just from people asking and telling me all about it. And it will be much more mature by then. And as a company, which is my priority, is to make these products that support cool technology for Bitcoin, well, I just can't justify being the first guinea pig when there's not even an implementation, there's not a formalized specification. There's just a lot of work to do there. And the prerequisite of a soft fork means it's probably more than 1 year away. It's probably 3-5 years away, if ever. So I have to prioritize how I spend my time, and we're just really busy working right now. So I'm just gonna let it kind of, come to me naturally. I mean, I could give you more detailed answer. I do know some things about it, but this crowd probably isn't that into all the technical details. I'll just say it's a lot of complexity, and there's going to be a lot of trade-offs, and I'm becoming very averse to like premature complexity.